Manx Radio Podcasts, powered by Shaw.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Hello and welcome to the latest look back at Talking Heads. Retail choice in Douglas, community buses, and the election of a new American president all featured in the discussion this week. Here's Stu Peters with more.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
Who should contribute financially to the upkeep of church buildings around the island? The island's outgoing Lord Bishop has issued a challenge to government over church properties. Speaking on Manx Radio's Praise programme yesterday, Robert Patterson said the church shouldn't be bearing the whole financial burden of looking after its buildings, particularly as some are used for community purposes too. He points to the UK, where assistance can be sought from the government itself directly or through the likes of heritage lottery grants. Bishop Roberts says private individuals, chapels and churches are having to go it alone here. What do we think about this? Irrespective of whether or not you're one of the faithful or not, it may well be that you use a church building for a community purpose, a secular purpose. What do you think about that? Who should pay for the upkeep of the church buildings? Should the government contribute in order to keep the buildings open to the public? Or, as the bishop says, is the building itself unimportant in the great scheme of things? And so with dwindling church numbers, apparently, should the church start to look at other venues for services? Is it really worthwhile keeping a big church building open all week for just a couple of services at the weekend? Does it matter where people get together? Is a church the people rather than the building? And what should happen to a lot of the church buildings around the Isle of Man? Should they be allowed to just fall apart because of lack of maintenance, because of lack of money? Or should government step in? And like I say, whatever your point of view about this, just be respectful. Stu, disgusting how the congregation of these Americanised churches can buy their own so-called leaders. So-called. New houses, but our own churches seem to suffer in silence, says he. Hey, listen, if I could get my congregation to buy me a new house, then I'd be sending out the forms now as we speak. Nobody's forcing anybody to do anything. You know, it's down to them. I expect Church of England churches could do the same thing and say, you know, we want to build this or we want to do that. I'm sure some of them do. I sent this in yesterday, but Roger wouldn't read it. I know one church that's not losing money on the Isle of Man. They hard sell God to their congregation and hand out 10% of your wage direct debit forms. Jackpot, says Ray. Well, again, it's a voluntary thing. If people choose to do that, then that is entirely up to them. Is it called tithing? I used to work with somebody who was very into tithing, and it sounds like a wonderful thing to do, where you hand 10% of your or whatever percentage of your income over to your church. If you feel that strongly about it, if you've been touched by the Holy Spirit, then it seems a perfectly reasonable thing to do. I think I'd make a good TV evangelist in America. Send $5. I need a new widescreen telly. But maybe not. Give the God Squad half the tax they pay back to them for maintenance. Nothing. Right, okay, fine. Come on, Bishop, quote the facts. You have a shortfall on pensions and have no more properties to sell, so must dig into the maintenance funds, says somebody else. Okay. National Secular Societies Charter number 7. The state does not engage in, fund or promote religious activities or practices. Oh, there you go. That's from our pal Muriel, who's a free thinker, amongst other things. So what that's saying is that the government's got absolutely no remit at all in terms of supporting the church. It needs to stay arm's length from it. Okay. Turn them into mosques, says somebody else. Well, I don't think there'll be any more Muslims to visit them than there are Christians to visit the churches. There's a church meeting up the cat and a cat with no tail on Sundays. I suppose the buildings are insignificant in the grand scheme of a person's faith. That was what I'd always understood about it, that, religion to me has always struck me as being something that affects you personally, and that you can talk to your God on a one-to-one basis rather than have to do it as part of a congregation. Though I do understand that with churches people talk about the church family. I think it's a good way of maybe lonely people getting together as well, and all sorts of good activities which are a benefit to the whole community. So there's a lot to be said for it. But yes, I suppose that if you're a religious person of any denomination, then you don't necessarily need to worship en masse. Some church buildings are magnificent symbols of what a congregation can build when they all apply their faith and friendship to a project. Could see the building as a lasting legacy to those who built them and the purpose for what they were built. Some churches are diversifying to help with the upkeep of them. St Ninian's Church hosts a great series of intimate acoustic nights. Great atmosphere and great setting for them, and all helping with the church funds, says Rich. Okay, if our churches aren't funded, I expect that in years to come they'll be taken on by rather more practised religions. Okay, all right. Let's go to the lines and have a word with Howard. Hello, Howard.
A tithe, of course, it is or was formerly up to 10% of your income or produce that from your farms, etc.
Yes.
At the bottom, I'm just saying to Kath, in the bottom of the Cornet, there's a little mill down there, and like the rest of the mills on the island, they used to have a tax called a quorn, and that was done away with many years ago. They had to support themselves. But the way the bishop here is going on about how the government should look after it, if, and rightly what you say, if you want to support these things, you should pay for them.
Yeah.
And not impose a tax unilaterally on everybody on the island for something that they don't use.
Yes.
There may be atheists, there may be Muslims, there may be any religion, and you're going to be taxed regardless whether you go to church or you don't.
Yes.
The way this man is talking. The churches, the properties, the lands and everything belong to the churches. So if the government turned around and said, right, I'm going to knock that church down, I'm going to put a block of flats on it, they hue and cry.
Yeah.
And so how can somebody that owns all that property not ask, but more or less demand a tax for the people of the island to look after them?
Well, there are a lot of churches that have closed down, aren't there?
There's a lot of churches that have been sold.
Yeah, been turned into offices or pubs or wine bars or...
Well, some of them have got covenants on. The two churches in Bucks Road, they were both, well, one was knocked down and the other was made into an office block.
Yeah.
But the one that was made into an office block, I believe, had a covenant on it. Couldn't be a wine bar or a nightclub or anything like that. It was an agricultural house. But I don't even know what it is now. But the one down,
I think one of them is going to be turned into flats, I heard the other day. I don't know if that's true or not.
All probability. But again, who owns these properties? The church.
Yes.
One of the richest institutions in the world.
Well, I know that the Roman Catholic Church is one of the most rich institutions in the world. I don't know about the Anglican Church.
Well, they were... the Anglican churches were the instigators of the prudential insurance.
Ah, right, okay.
So
well, that should have brought a few bob
they
in.
had their finger in that pie, so their monies, and the monies that they have, they are investing worldwide. Some of them are controversial where they've been investing it.
Yes.
This Welby chap, he's had to withdraw funds from certain investments because of the corruption and illegal moves going on.
Oh, I see. They've had to move them into more ethical investments,
so they're not exactly destitute.
No, all right.
They got the begging bowl out, the people that already got a begging bowl out themselves.
Gotcha. All right, Howard, thank you very much for your call. Always nice to talk to you. Tithing, the original form of crowdfunding, says one of our contributors. Yeah, I suppose in a way it was. David called. Well, it was a tax, wasn't it, on parishioners, effectively. Further to the Bishop's comments, I wonder if he'd like the government to contribute to the £9 million vanity project at Peel Cathedral. This is from David. It benefits neither the sick or the poor. Princess Anne is the patron. Perhaps she'd like to chip in. No, I think her involvement in that will be to turn up and say a few words, won't it? Alice says about these church buildings, the bishop may have a point about needing help. However, the Church of England here doesn't always seem that good at looking after buildings or accepting help. Seem very bureaucratic and not straightforward. For instance, we had our wedding party in the small church hall at the Doon 12 years ago. It's a beautiful building, and the arts and crafts style opened in 1912. The windows obviously needed a coat of paint, so we offered to paint them. I've offered about 10 times in the 12 years since, and they keep ignoring the offers. I also pointed out 12 years ago that the building needs some ventilation to stop it getting damp. This was ignored. Also, I was told that a local builder had offered to pay for materials to make repairs. Nothing happened. I've been told by church members that they want to sell off the building, but I don't see why that should mean they let this beautiful building rot for the want of minor repairs. Also, I think it's a well-loved and used local community resource. For example, it was open last night for bonfire night refreshments. So I think that more people would like to get involved to use the church and raise funds if they're actually allowed to. Interesting that, Alice. Thank you very much for getting in touch. Hey boy, let the God Squad fund their own and hopefully not the taxpayer, says Frank. Okay. Happy Monday, Frank. One comment earlier about turning them into mosques. Be careful what you wish for, springs to mind, says Ray. Most of the clergy of all these churches are very well paid with a good pension, some, if not all, living in rent-free accommodation. I wonder if there was a second coming, what him upstairs would have to say about it. Let's face it, the clergy's pensions are more important than bricks and mortar, says Alan. I don't know, Alan. I don't know if you're right or not. Tom says, like most people, I only go to church for hatch, match or dispatch services. I think the government should pay something towards the upkeep. Okay. Don't believe in Jesus or religion or churches for that matter. Religion has a lot to answer for. Well, yes, I mean, I'm an atheist, but having said that, I do have respect for anybody who's got religion of any brand. Not bothered what it is, but, you know, it seems that it's one of those things that, as the Americans say, you either get it or you don't get it. You don't got it. And so, you know, I think it's a bit silly sometimes to brand people as being daft because they've got religion or whatever. Some local residents probably spend more than 10% of their salaries, wages on their chosen religion of going down to the pub or supporting the football team off Ireland. So what's the difference really, says Graham. Okay. Well said, someone. About Peel Cathedral. Disgrace, building in cloister plus vicarage, totally renovated and extended for guests. Guess who will use the cloister? Millions on a pure vanity project. So much needing to do this. Local Peel people just don't go anymore or hold their funerals there. Stu, the God botherers have always told me that God will provide. Time for him to put his hand in his pocket if he really exists. Stu, thanks for a balanced and neutral stance on the church upkeep issue. Well, I try. The churches were originally built by their congregations, making the Church of England the biggest landowner in the British Isles. Our local bishop relied on the UK C of E over a recent disciplinary case. To now expect the Isle of Man government to support their failing churches is an attitude 10 years out of date. If the C of E neglects its own buildings, why should I as a taxpayer support them? They need to recognise their own infrastructure, not plead poverty because they're not poor, just maybe too tight to recognise their own responsibility to maintaining their own heritage. That from Bob. Don't churches get enough through our rates? Atheists don't get support from the government, Buddhists don't get government support, and I bet other religious organisations don't either. Religion is just a borderline brainwash idea that causes fights, Stu. Out from Kev. Those parish churches contain within their walls over 1,000 years of history sometimes. Please preserve these historical buildings. That from Robin Peel. And that is a good suggestion.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Does Strand Street need big name UK chain stores to survive, do you think? The health of high streets has been a concern across the Western world for a number of years now. An upsurge in online retailing has obviously affected footfall in many areas. The past few weeks have seen a spike in rumours and announcements surrounding the imminent closure of several Douglas shops. So what do we think about this? Are chain stores important to attract shoppers, or do you prefer local independent retailers anyway? And I'm just looking at some of the comments earlier on Manx Radio's Facebook page about this, where the story was first posted. And a lot of comments about the fact that the Strand Shopping Centre has been taken over by Sports Direct, and they've apparently allegedly put the rents up. That's why people are moving out. But you would think that if companies like HMV and Mothercare were profitable in the Isle of Man, then they'll just move to other premises that aren't in the Strand Centre. I don't know. Stu, I'm not against online shopping, but I do find people to be quite lazy. For example, we have both PC World and Pets at Home, yet people buy online instead of driving 10 minutes up the road for dog meat. For what? Saving maybe a £5 on fuel in the purchase. Beside, those people buying online will keep me in a job. Right, good, okay. Monopoly of the Manx motor industry. This is from our Facebook page from Bob. Just wondering what the listeners' views are with regard to the new car company Jackson's. They're buying up most of the Manx dealerships. Will this be a good thing for the island? Yeah, interesting thought. I was up there only this morning actually picking up some stuff for the shop from the wholesalers, and I noticed that whole site's been cleared. And it looks as though it's going to be a huge site up there near B&Q. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Stu, no wonder M&S profits are down since the St Michael brand went. Did it? Did they get rid of St Michael? Their clothing's been rubbish, says Bert. I bought a pack of 300 pants, and the first time I wore them, they fell to pieces. I've got Marks and Spencer's underwear that must be 15 years old, Bert. What do you do with them? Okay, I got my money back, he says, but not the point. Well, that's the only place that I would consider buying socks or drawers, I think, Marks is, so I've never had a problem with them. But, I mean, that, if you're looking for a reputable, solid company, Marks and Spencer's got to be it, hasn't it? It's got to be the epitome, really, of a good, solid retailer. And the fact that their profits have dipped so massively, and no real apparent reason. I know that there will be reasons, but, no apparent reason. It's not as though they've been involved in any major disasters or any major scandals or anything like that, have they? I know that Tesco's were, I think, a while ago, but I don't think Marks and Spencer's as such. I think they might have changed chief executive recently, but I think 2014 profits 280 million, round figures, and this year they're looking at something like 27, 28 million. So they've lost best part of 90% of the profits in 2 years. Wow. Now, I wonder whether or not that's down to online shopping for the things that they sell, or whether there's another reason for it. But, it would suggest that the days of the high street might well be coming to a close, except for, and people say, oh, well, the trouble with Douglas is that every other shop's a coffee shop nowadays. That's one of those things that you can't really buy online, a cup of hot coffee, so that's why. And shops where you do need that personal service are the ones that will survive, I suppose. Whereas things that you can buy online, often cheaper, often more convenient to just sit at your computer and click on a button, and then the next thing is it's through the letterbox or whatever. Then that's a no-brainer, isn't it, for a lot of people? So are we going to see the face of shopping generally change completely? Stuart's very worrying. If Marks and Spencer's leave as well, Douglas will start looking like a ghost town. We need to support retail, but unfortunately shopping online will only continue to expand, says John. Yep. Unfortunately, retail units here are too small, therefore holding only a limited amount of stock, so shopping online gives more choice. That's from Margaret in Peel. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a fact that because we're an island, you couldn't really support a huge amount of floor space for a big warehouse at the back of your shop. Whereas in the UK, I suppose, if they run out of something in one store, then the next town along, you've got another branch and you can probably pinch stock from there. Whereas in the Isle of Man, it's a whole different thing. That's, I suppose, one of the problems about us being an island. This, I'm not sure who it's from. So I avoid Strand Street because most staff in shops have no idea what customer service is. Well, I think that's maybe partly true. Shopping on Amazon means that you can avoid miserable faces and people with no manners. Shops here are far too small with no choice. Okie dokie. Yeah, I must admit that I do find online shopping convenient, and apart from buying smalls at Marx's and elasticated jeans and things. You see, all I need is Marks and Spencer's. I'd be completely destroyed if Marx's went. Shops over here lack interest and flair. Prices are too expensive. What we have in larger stores seem to be leftovers from away. So many people go to Liverpool from here now to shop. Do they? Really? The cost of going over to Liverpool, it's worth it, is it? They have different things and more choice. TK Maxx is doing well because they're different, says Pat. OK. What's this? Shopping in town might be better if the parking wombles got made redundant. That's not nice. That's anarchy, that. If we didn't have parking controllers, you'd have people parking in disabled bays and on pavements and all sorts of things if we didn't have parking controllers. My wife runs a clothes shop in Laxey. Her customers shop in a relaxed manner, not worrying about getting a ticket. Oh, you can just park anywhere you like in Laxey, right, OK. M&S should look to improving the quality of the merchandise. St Michael's goods were made in Britain and lasted. Also, need to work out which age groups they're aiming at. Young people don't buy the clothes and older people want style and quality. I want elastic. I'm not bothered about style and quality. Store here is crammed and jumbly, and food departments often a scramble between shelf fillers, shoppers and shouty staff. Not a good experience, says Sue. I don't shop there enough to know. I can't hear people shouting in the men's underwear department. What else have we got? I hope the Strand doesn't turn into a tracksuit and trainers only centre, says JC. No. Well, that would perhaps work in Liverpool, but I don't think it would work in Douglas. What else? Topic worth discussing. This is from Derek. House prices in the Isle of Man being 20% higher than the UK, as shown in the Manx paper this morning. I'll have a look at that. With government bleating on about attracting people to come here to work, it's certainly something that should be discussed. Right, OK, well, we'll look at it. And it goes along with the loss of shops. If young people want to continue to shop online or get the boat to Liverpool to do all the shopping, then there won't be any shops here. It's as simple as that. Good point. Let's go to the lines. We've got Howard on, thankfully. Hello, Howard.
We're saying about with the shopping, etc.
Yeah.
I tend to agree with what one texter said. My wife always believed in this, that the stuff we get on the island here is residue from other shops,
Yes.
from the bigger shops. And I know of people that do go away regular, and the cost of just going on the boat, 30 quid, you can save that in what you buy.
Okay.
Just going through into Liverpool, 30 odd quid. You can save that in 2 purchases going across and come back with a load of stuff.
Okay.
So this is where the local shops have their hands tied.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, what our total population spread amongst all the shops, not just 1 or 2 of them, all the shops, is little more than what you get at a decent football match in the UK.
That's the problem. Yeah.
And, it's the limited numbers. But also, you walk through Strand Street now, it's either a charity shop, a coffee shop, or a clothes shop.
Yep.
There's very little down there of any, anything of any consequence. You've got to go somewhere special or online to pick anything up because they're so limited in what they can stock.
It seems to me that online is both the problem and the solution to many people.
It is. I'm guilty myself because this morning I've ordered 3 items online. But they are things that you can't get on the island.
Gotcha.
I
All
will
right.
try my best, if I can, to shop local.
Yeah, me too, but quite often you can't get what you want. So.
No, I just bought a new laptop. I bought that from what we term as a local store, not one of the big ones.
Yeah.
I won't mention the name, but if anything goes wrong with it, this particular firm is the agent and repair merchant, whatever you want to call them,
For that brand of laptops, yeah.
And I can go back to them, and they know what they're talking about.
That's
They're not
very
just going to
important.
Sell you a box.
Yeah. I think I'm hoping to upgrade my telly soon to a 4K one, and I think I'll buy it locally rather than from from a proper local store as well, rather than one of the big chains. Good stuff. All right, Howard, thank you for getting in touch. Let's go to line 4, and we've got Tommy on. Hello, Tom.
I'm just trying to get over the thought of you and elasticate teams.
Well, I'm getting to that age.
I had to go for a lie down. I can imagine the image. You must look like something between Billy Dainty and Max Wall walking into the studio, Stu.
I buy for comfort and not style these days, Tom.
Oh, I know. I'm the same as well. Yeah. No, I was just saying to Catherine, I mean, everybody thinks we went through a recession and we came out, but we didn't, Stu. As far as I'm concerned, we're still in recession, and most of the world's still in recession.
Yes.
You know.
I think you're probably right, actually. Yeah.
Oh, and I never really think so. Brighter days are ahead, but I don't think they are.
Well, somebody told me recently that retail generally in the Isle of Man was down something like 20-25%, this year. So I think that bears out what you're saying. People have just not got the money to spend on fripperies these days, have they?
Well, that's very scary, Stu, that percentage, isn't it, when you think about it?
Of course it is. Well, it is if you've got a retail business, yeah, even more scary.
I mean, yeah, it's all these blooming coffee shops that are doing it all, And that. I know, Stu, I know it's necessary, but the previous shop was right. I mean, all the towns across, small to medium towns, they're exactly the same, Stu. All their high streets are all deserted. As the gentleman said, charity shops, coffee shops, and fast food outlets.
Yeah.
I mean, as you said, how will it change, Stu? Unless you bring legislation in that you can only buy a certain amount off the internet.
Well, I mean, I think the problem with a lot of high streets in the UK is that they're almost like identikit shopping centres. They're all exactly the same with exactly the same shops. I mean, at least we're a bit different in the Isle of Man, but
No, I mean, what do people want, Stu? I mean,
we've got to. We've got to realise that we're a very few people, and therefore, you're not going to have a busy high street full of all the big brands with a whole range of stock, I suppose.
Exactly right, Stuart. 80-odd thousand. We're not even a small town over in the UK, Stu.
That's the trouble.
We should be thankful for what we got, really, Stu, don't you think?
Well, I think that's probably the answer. Yeah, be thankful for what we've got. Thanks for your call, Tommy. I need to move on. With regard to your caller's comments about house prices, I was speaking to an estate agent the other day. He said there's a worrying amount of properties unoccupied, being on the market for so long. He said if this was actually known and taken into consideration when pricing a property prices on the island would drop so significantly that the housing market would collapse on the island, says John. I've heard rumours like that in the past, but I don't know if any of it's true. Build a multi-storey car park on the old Villiers site. No parking on the prom. It'll make the prom nicer and make it possible to actually get a park. That's from Brian in Douglas. Shop rents far too dear, disgrace. That's why they're empty. That's from somebody in Williston. We live on an island. We can't expect to have the big shops here. Maybe if people shop local, we would have a lot more choice because more of them would be able to afford to stay open. If you don't like it, there's a boat in the morning, says Jackie. Oh dear. We do need some shops. I've been waiting for a product that I ordered online 2 weeks ago. It's still not dispatched. Plus, it's nice to see and touch things to ensure that the right colour and size. Plus, online shopping is killing independent retail with the choice it offers, says Jan. Yep, that's true. What else? There isn't enough footfall to support big name shops over here. There's a boat in the morning if people don't like what we have. Yep. Yeah, you can't argue with that, really. Shop rents in Douglas are astronomical, and add in the staff wages, it's no wonder that prices of basic things here are too high and shops have to close. We've got Chris on our final call this afternoon talking about the motor trade. Hello, Chris.
Hi, Stuart.
Yeah.
It's just that a previous caller mentioned this, and it jogged my memory.
Oh.
I've lived on the Isle of Man for 50 years. I came here to work for EB Christians, and EB's actually had 4 outlets on the Isle of Man then.
Yeah.
And then Ocean Ford took over. But is there any Monopolies Commission on the Isle of Man?
I don't think we've got a Monopolies Commission as such. No, I don't think.
Because when you think I came here and there was 12 main dealers on the Isle of Man, mainly family-run companies,
Yes.
and we're going to end up with 2.
All right. Well, interesting thought. I don't know how it's all going to pan out, but good. Thank you for your call. I'm sorry, I do need to move on because I'm running out of time, but thanks for calling, Chris. I've worked in a shoe shop, says somebody, and I hope that you're not one of the people who came in and asked to try the shoes on in the window to get them. We get them regularly. Well, you will do. If you've got shoes on display in the window, they're the ones that people are going to want to try on. Or am I missing something?
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
You're listening to the latest Talking Heads podcast, featuring highlights from the programme over the past week.
The Nation Station. Manx Radio.
Is the American election result a victory for people power? Or did you wake up this morning, see the news and go, oh no? Donald Trump celebrating and after unexpectedly beating Hillary Clinton to become the next president of the United States. Is this a result to be celebrated or despaired? Tell us what you think about this. We heard the Treasury Minister on Mandate this morning saying that, maybe this is another backlash against established politics. Brexit was maybe a case of that. Maybe the Manx election was a case of that, where, people are just fed up of politicians telling us what to think and what to do. So maybe the fact that everybody assumed that Hillary Clinton was going to win this led people to go out and say, actually, no, don't tell us what to think, don't tell us what to do. We'll make our own minds up about this. An awful lot of my pals on Facebook this morning are absolutely despairing about this as a result. But I was chatting to a pal this morning who said, no, it just shakes things up a little bit, this. Maybe not a bad thing after all. And to be honest, having watched the TV news a couple of times this morning, it seems that Putin is quite warm towards the idea of Donald Trump and building a better relationship with the US. Well, if we can get the Russians and the Americans on more friendly terms, if that's all that he ever does, Donald Trump, then that'd be a good enough thing, I think. So the USA have elected a clown. Yeah, Dodo the clown. So have we quite a few times ourselves. Okay. Rest of us shouldn't worry too much. Ronnie Reagan didn't press the red button. I think that's the thing about this, in that, as Ed Oldham was saying yesterday, he's much more learned as far as American politics than I am. But he said that, considering that this is supposedly the most important job in the world, the most powerful man in the world, he's got limited power, actually. And then he needs to work within the system, and there are all sorts of checks and balances that will prevent any of these crazy things, hopefully, that he was suggesting in the run-up to the election about it. I've always thought, though, I would imagine the situation is that when he's elected, when he's inaugurated, they'll take him to the White House, go into the Oval Office, and then one of the aides will say, oh, and by the way, Mr. President, the boss is downstairs. He'd like a quiet word with you before you sit down. And that's where he's introduced to, I don't know, the Rothschild Isles or whoever really controls the world, because I'm pretty sure it's not the politicians. David says, an American perspective, he says. This is one freedom-loving American's perspective on yesterday's presidential election outcome. It wasn't a surprise to me, and neither was the recent Brexit vote. As I just said to an associate in the reinsurance industry in London in response to his inquisitive query about what happened in America yesterday wasn't a bunch of hellraisers dressed as American Indians throwing cartons of British tea overboard into Boston Harbour. It was the shot heard round the world on the North Bridge in Concord, Massachusetts. I told him and others gathered around that whilst many in their elitist ivory towers throughout Britain didn't quite understand everyday Brits' attitudes towards not allowing a faraway unelected globalist in Brussels to run their lives for them, it certainly was clear as a bell, at least to the English-speaking peoples, why regular British people voted to leave the European Union. What happened in the United States yesterday was America's own Brexit from the corrupt, elitist, big, uncontrolled government, which had become far worse than George III's tea tax in Parliament. Freedom of the individual and liberty of the common man. Long may she wave. That's from David, who's got homes in America, London, and in Long Beach in the States. Good, okay, thank you for that. Stu, how's Mr. Trump going to form a government? He rings a bell and shouts, pew, pew, Parliament, grew, Cuthbert, Dublin Crub. You're in. Welcome to the United States of Trumpton, says Dave. Yes, a few people have alluded to Trumpton links and things. Dear Stu, well, Trump made it and Putin's already asked for a meeting as he believes that there are a number of projects that he and Trump can both work on together. How long that will last, who knows, but it's a lot better than another Cold War and sabre rattling, says Christine. Yep, good point, I agree with you. After the dirtiest of presidential campaigns of recent times, America's elected Donald Trump as their leader. I held no brief for Hillary Clinton. From what we hear, there was little to choose between them, but I hope that despite all the things said against her, that she would be chosen by the majority as the lesser of two evils. That was kind of how I looked at it, I must admit. I mean, who'd have voted for her, really, if there was a better alternative? And I never thought Trump was a better alternative. It was not to be. Now America and possibly the world is where it is, and life will go on. Personally, I think it's a terrible indictment of the US that they've ended up with somebody who, quite honestly, at best, comes over as a complete buffoon. At worst, he's frequently made outrageous comments of a racist and misogynistic nature, which thousands of Americans, and others including me, find extremely offensive. Added to which he has little or no political diplomatic experience. Is he really fit for the role? I would suggest probably not. However, it's no good being pessimistic. Life goes on. I just hope that presumably there are people in the White House whose job is to advise the president, whoever he or she may be, and who will keep a rein on Trump. We can but hope, says Pam. Good points. Thank you, Pam. Stu, is it true that Trumpton is returning to children's telly shortly? That's from Peter. Nigel Farage at last has a chance to really get his life back by relocating to America and helping to build the wall. There's a silver lining to every cloud, says Sue. Great news about Donald Trump. Just wonder how long before he's assassinated, says Sal. Oh, interesting thought. It has crossed my mind, actually, that I was surprised it got this far in some ways. His election is an unspeakable horror. This is from our friend Andrew, who's from New Jersey. His election is an unspeakable horror and a low point for our nation, and that's gilding the lily. He's given permission for our children to behave however they want and still reap rewards. On behalf of the majority who voted for Hillary, she won the popular vote, not the electoral vote. I apologise. How does immigration to the Isle of Man work? Stu will look back on Trump's first term of office as he sets his sights on a second term while Hillary Clinton sits in jail, and we'll all be saying he did well and deserves a second term, says Pete. Okay. Politics, strange phenomenon. Like many parts of the world, America is looking for something other than the mundane system in place. You have to think hard for something extraordinary. Barack Obama has achieved on his term of office. He seems to be smiling handshaker with invisible strings attached to his political bosses. As the people have voted for Trump, it's a statement by the people of the country for a change of direction. Hopefully, any news coming from the USA will be good news. Trump is not one to smile and let things wash over him. That from Howard. Amazed at how almost the whole Isle of Man population became US political experts overnight on social media. Well, you don't have to be a political expert. You just look at these people and decide whether or not their eyes are too close together. Trump won fair and square. He'll shake things up, maybe for the better. Well, that's the hope, I think, isn't it? I think it's a good thing compared to the puppets who've been in office for the last 20 years. Let's wait and see. Fair comment. Yeah, I can't disagree with that. Stu, how many American migrants, refugees can the Isle of Man take, says David H. Stu, all presidents are really only front men to distract you from the people who really run or ruin more like the country. That from Ian. I agree with that, definitely, yeah. Stu, I think Donald Trump will need his Secret Service. This has JFK again written all over it, says Bob. All right, that's the worry. Is there any point in listening to opinion polls? They seem to get it wrong every time, says Tom. That's true. James D. called Brexit and Trump. It's called democracy. Get over it. All right. Immigration to the Isle of Man is simple. Bring a few £1,000,000 with you and you can do whatever you want. Unlike the Manxes, says John. Well, if you had a few £1,000,000, you'd be able to do whatever you wanted as well, John. Stu, every cloud has a silver lining. I'm starting a new business in nuclear bunkers. Expecting a full order book soon, says John.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Might community buses be a better option for serving rural areas in the Isle of Man? The island's bus service needs to be more community focused. That admission from the politician in charge of public transport. The new infrastructure minister told the House of Keys this week the service needed to be more inclusive. Ray Harmer was asked by Onken MHK Rob Callister, what his department's plans are to improve public transport links in and around Onken. What do you think about this? Are community buses the key to securing a more cost-effective bus network? Is responding to demand rather than sticking to a fixed timetable a better way of serving the community? Or could it ultimately end up costing an awful lot more? And just to play devil's advocate on this, if you need regular access to towns or facilities, why live out in rural areas? Who should run them? Should it be the Department of Transport, the DOI, or should it be, maybe this is the sort of thing that volunteer organisations could look at. I don't know. Maybe you do, though, so get in touch and tell us. Charles says, let's get Uber here on the island. Then we can stop being ripped off by the massive current taxi fares. Then community buses may not be required if taxi fares are better value. All the best from Charles. All I can say about that, Charles, is that I did have a spell as a taxi driver years and years ago. It's probably about 15 years ago now. And, the taxi drivers aren't making fortunes. Maybe if you're an owner and you've got a plate and all the rest of it, you can make a good living at it. The majority of people are driving for others and, it's very hard to scratch a living, especially unless you're prepared to battle with all the drunks late at night. I used to hate that, so I used to work days and it was below minimum wage, trust me. If there was a better service for the bus, it would be used more. In addition, the bus design doesn't allow more than one modern wheelchair on. Well, maybe the wheelchairs ought to be redesigned then so that they can fit on better. Sorry, but Signpost Corner has a good service, says somebody else. And then I moaned when we lost the 23, but now find the number 2 great, as you can get to work down south and to the airport. Still goes via the bus station. We have the 1H, which goes through on Ham to the hospital. Then a follow-up text saying, I hate predictive text, which goes through something to the hospital. Yeah, I hate predictive text as well. It'd probably be cheaper to provide free taxis than a bus. The service loses too much money already. What next for Mr. Callister? Free rent, free travel and abolishing rates for the good people of Onken? Says Cliffy. Good, okay. Let's get some different points of view on this one. So get in touch and tell us what you think about it. Buses. Do you think that the current system works as is? It seems to me that whenever apart from when I'm driving along, going past the bus station in Douglas, most of the buses that I see out on the roads have only got a couple of people on, or so it feels, so it seems. Whether that's fair or not, I don't know. But maybe more small buses. I believe that the reason that we've got to have the big double-deckers is to cope with the school runs in the morning and the afternoons. So they can't get rid of them and replace them all with these little minibus jobs. But could more of those small buses be a good cost saving, or does it just add to the fleet? Also, the bus service would be used more, but where do Onken people have to shelter from the rain and wind until the bus turns up, especially at the old bank site and by the Methodist church? Well, hasn't it always been thus, that in inclement weather you stand to get a bit cold and wet? I don't understand why Mr. Callister is claiming that the Signpost Corner area could be better served by public transport. 4 buses an hour in both directions travel up and down the road from the Manx Arms to Signpost and beyond. Another goes up as far as the top entrance to Birch Hill opposite the new school. That from David. Thank you, David. Stu, I was in northern Norway last year. The remote coastal villages were served by a small Seacat type fast craft. This was an on-demand service. For example, you phone them up if you wanted to, and they'd call it in. It could be a possibility for more remote areas of the Isle of Man. What, a Seacat? I'd like to go over to Liverpool to do some shopping. Send me the Seacat now. Yes, I can't imagine that would be terribly cost effective. About buses, Peel to Ramsey bus gets to Ramsey 5 minutes after the bus to Douglas has left. Could we have some joined thinking so that we can get off the Peel bus and get on the bus to Douglas if we need to? Taxis in Ramsey are rubbish late at night. That from Chris. Yes, well, joined up thinking is definitely something that we could do with. That seems mad, doesn't it? The buses are scheduled so that one goes before another one arrives, that people might want to use. I don't know anything about the buses, so I don't know whether or not there's a reason for that or not, but it does seem daft. Buster says, Stu, I hope this government will define to provide only the statutory services they have to provide. A bus service is not an essential service, therefore government should cease to fund it. I expect that some people, I can see where you're going with that, Buster, but I would imagine that a lot of people would disagree with it and say that it is an essential service, especially for people who maybe can't afford to keep a car and need to get to the hospital, for example, can't afford taxis. So another thought, this is from Frank, highest paid drivers in Europe and nobody on the things. Okay, irrespective of the size of the bus, they'll still have to pay drivers' wages, fuel and insurance on the vehicle, says John. Yeah, and while smaller buses might be useful things to have and cheaper to run, you're quite right, you've still got those costs, and also you've got additional costs because these smaller buses wouldn't replace the big double-deckers, I suppose, so maybe it's a bit of a non-starter, that as an idea. Stu, this may be off tangent, but if the driving age was raised to 21 years, young people will learn how to use our public transport services or walk more. Health benefits. The added bonus would be less cars on the road, fewer cars on the road, and of course significantly fewer road accidents. That from Doreen in Onken. Well, yeah, the trouble with that, though, is that it would be counter to the interests of our young people. In that a lot of, in the Isle of Man, you can learn to drive at 16, can't you? It's 17, I think, still in the UK. So that does give Manx young people a bit of an advantage there. And if you raise the age to 21 before they could get a licence, then any of them that wanted to go off island would be at a severe disadvantage, I think. So maybe not the best idea. I use the Onken buses, and I think the service is excellent. Well, there you go. So maybe it's all a bit of a storm in a teacup. Maybe it's all a bit of a fuss. Maybe it's another lingering relic of the election campaigns where on the doorstep people were saying, we need more buses, we need the buses sorting out. And promises have been made to sort them out. And from what this one says, I use the Onken bus. I think the service is excellent. It might just be that, of course, you are using a service that's there that happens to coincide with what you need it to do. But anyway, let's go to the lines. I think we've got David Quirk on. Hello, David.
You just remind me that I'm travelling across the promenade now, following one of the buses, a big one too. And near, I shouldn't think, but the Palace Hotel there, 3 got off, and there was only 6 people on the bus altogether.
Yeah.
So that's come from a major place into a major place, and here we are, nearly 1 o'clock, 6 on a bus. That's a bit poor, isn't it?
So you think that the buses aren't used enough to actually warrant any investment?
Well, I think we need to do the figures first. There was some promise from the previous department, which Kate Beecroft was responsible for, was for the data to come out because they were going to record all where places were over capacity, where they were under capacity, and they'd be able to look at the better planning for it. But can I just say, Stu, what they did have a look to, there was a challenge given out last year regarding the number of minibuses that's owned by government or under the control of government, either in schools and whatever, about having what you said before, like somebody said, a dial and ride system.
Yeah.
And we are creatures of habit. So we do our shopping, we do go in at a certain time, we go to the supermarkets at a certain day, we go to pick our pensions up on a certain day. So we're creatures of habit. So a little bit of planning and then using those vehicles which are just lying around, which are small vehicles, which people want. Because the only thing Auckland suffers from, and I was probably faulted at donkeys years ago, we built the estates where we didn't have link roads in, where the buses went round in a loop.
Right.
And they're just on an arm. A prime example of that is we can't get the big bus down to one of the sheltered accommodations in Onken up near Signpost Corner.
Okay.
But if the bus company went into the new Bemhague School and just used the roundabout and came back, they'd be 20 feet away from the door.
All right, fair dues. Thank you very much for calling, David. It's nice to hear from you. Hey boy, here's Frank again. Joined up thinking if only the regeneration scheme had incorporated bus stops outside the bookies, Dole office and the Traff. I'll not hear a word against the Traff. Our pal Ben Sowry runs that now. Then Ramsey's Finest would be able to get into these businesses to spend more benefits and boost the profits. That may then allow for the owners to buy some much-needed wall-mounted ashtrays. Thank you, Frank. Maria called. They were supposed to get smaller buses and use in the out-of-town areas. I live off Droghedvale Road and there are no buses which go up to where I am. They said they were getting smaller buses to serve the area, but it hasn't happened. Even a service which runs twice a day would be fine, and I don't mind paying for it. I don't drive, and it's difficult if you have heavy shopping to walk all the way up from the main road. Okay. I think we need bendy buses. Yeah, okay. Well done, that caught me unawares. Not long back from a holiday in Mallorca, says Pam. Granted, it's a bigger island with, at least during the tourist season, a much larger population, though this drops massively in the off-season. I'd hazard a guess that they also have a lot of more remote rural areas. Notice their transport systems seem to be really good. I stayed about 50 k's from the capital, which had a really good cheap bus service to and from Palma. The bus station in Palma, as Douglas is concerned, was to die for. Situated underground, it has access to trains, taxis, city buses, plus cafes, shops and an information bureau. Bus services to other parts of the island were also good, and my friend and I made good use of them. Okay, yes, I wonder. I suppose it's a different thing altogether, and the fact is that during the summer season, then that probably pays for the buses to run in the off-season, whereas in the Isle of Man, you know, we don't get that many tourists. I noticed on Facebook yesterday, was it the day before, somebody had posted a picture of Douglas in the late 60s, early 70s. And you couldn't have walked along the promenade walkway because people were all there in deck chair. I mean, it was just absolutely jam-packed with people. Now, I'm sure a lot of people listening to this today will remember those days. But, you know, some people seem to think that we should still get the facilities and the services that were paid for by those hundreds of thousands of people, and we just don't have that sort of income anymore, or the need for the infrastructure to support those kind of visitor numbers. So some things I think we just need to rethink. But thanks for your comments, Pam.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Should the number of jurors in serious cases be increased? A major set of recommendations on jury reform will be debated next week. Tynwald Committee formed to examine the operation of the jury systems, presenting 13 proposals to Tynwald on Tuesday. They include counselling for jurors who've encountered sensitive cases, a centralised database for potential jurors, and pay for those who take time off work to attend court sittings. What do you think about this? Should the size of juries be increased, or could that make it more difficult to find the right people to serve on juries? Are majority verdicts a good idea? Mr. Robert Shaw's always going on about the government not getting anything done. Why then is he proposing to bog them down with yet more unwarranted legislation? I'm sure he would have heard from the legal trade and judiciary if the jury system needs changing, says Alan. OK, well, that's one point of view. Is this unnecessary, maybe? Brian makes a very good point. He says, with this being just such a small island, with everybody knowing everybody else or being related to one another, the nobbling is potentially very high. I think all jurors should come from off-island, where there's no possibility of this happening. That'd make it expensive, wouldn't it, if you had to bring people over and put them up in hotels and things and pay them and all the rest of it. But you're quite right. I mean, I don't think... it's very rare that you ever meet anybody in the Isle of Man and you don't know somebody that they know, or members of their family or whatever. Everybody does sort of know. Those degrees of separation are far fewer, I think, in the Isle of Man than anywhere else, and that must be a problem in trying to put a jury together. And of course, as was suggested by James Davis, things like social media these days, it must be difficult to get a jury together of people who've not been influenced by coverage. The media works under, the established media works under very established rules about that, so as not to prejudice a trial. But social media, not policed to the same level, certainly. And quite often you see comments on social media that you know that the mainstream media just just wouldn't dare publish. So it's a difficult one, this. And I do love the fact on this programme that we sometimes get completely polarised points of view on things. Stu, my point of view in the next 5 years, is the next 5 years going to be filled with Mr. Robert Shaw finding publicity-seeking projects for himself? That from Albert. And then the flip side of that, this is needed. Chris Robert Shaw is right. This is a pre-war relic. It needs to be 12 for fairness, says somebody else. Good. I think Chris Robert Shaw watches too many crime films, thinks that they're all real, and reading comics, get in the real world, nobbling juries. The way he talks, you'd think that the island was run by the mafia, says Charlie. Well, some people, Charlie, would suggest that the island is run by the Manx Mafia, so not the crime organisation, just the way that things are done. Let's face it, the present system's archaic. Like a lot of things on the Isle of Man, people need to stop attacking Chris personally. Okay, what's this? Stu, the prom hasn't changed since the Second World War either, but they're promising to change that, so no rush. Stu, I think 12 is a good number to give a fair hearing, and some cases are so complicated more people can take more information on board. Can they? With regards to the impartiality in the island, this must prove very difficult unless you are my husband, who's never and will never do social media and hates gossip, says Jan. Well, he's a perfect juror. And I've had somebody call in who works within the justice system, who didn't want to be identified for obvious reasons, who says that what we need, that the jury system ought to be replaced by lay members who serve on a panel. So effectively, we'd have a professional jury of people who are all very intelligent, who understand law, and therefore are able to sit on all cases, and they can sort of ensure impartiality. Now, there's a thought. I did ask our caller if there were any models for that anywhere else, and he didn't think so, but there may be. Maybe it's something that you've heard of somewhere else. I don't know. Stu, during jury selection, just say hi to the defendant. You won't be picked. That's how I can get off with it. All right, fair dues. I'd quite like to serve on a jury. I would think it's quite interesting work, that. The reason that we have 7 on a jury is because we have a small population. Mr. Robert Shaw didn't have a ringing endorsement at the election, says Bill. I was called a few years ago, says David. I was self-employed in a one-man business selling cars, so I had to close the business. Potential losses were huge. I appealed to the registrar for exemption, but was refused. Oh, really? As it happens, the defendant changed his plea before we were sworn in. The process gives no incentive to do your duty, says David. Well, I think I'd be a bit miffed by that if I was told that, there were no exemptions. The fact that you're self-employed and therefore you can't eat while you're serving your country, then I think I'd feel a bit miffed by that. Surely, in fact, I'm sure I would. Surely, if you increase the size of the jury, you'll have to call more people for selection, as more potential jurors could be disqualified for knowing the defendant. More disruption and cost for the government. Keep things as simple as possible. Over-governance is not the best thing, says Josh. Okay. If you have a professional jury, they could have inbuilt prejudices, and you're still picking from a small population. A different changing jury means that they come from a wide range of backgrounds which won't prejudice the defendant. All right, but not regularly. I'm not sure I agree with that, because they might still have prejudices. It's just that they won't be able to apply them to every case. Joy called, there's a panel system in France. I think that they should bring a panel of lay people in here instead of juries. There would be a cost saving. I've talked to a lot of advocates and people involved in the system, and the jury system here isn't working. Stu, my experience of jury service at Manchester Crown Court was not a rewarding experience. I was too shy to say much. The bully wanted to convict a woman just because her husband was well off, and he wanted to finish early because he'd promised to take his wife shopping for a new dress. The bully. That from Joan. Okay. I think some callers appear to be presuming that everyone is guilty and the jury is just there to rubber stamp the verdict. But the whole point is to listen to the evidence and make a judgment. Don't forget, it's supposed to be beyond reasonable doubt, not just I don't like the look of him or her. It's a huge responsibility that could affect accused and victims' life beyond repair if the wrong decision's made. I wouldn't want to do it. Stu, I was called for jury service once a long time ago. It was in the UK, though. I had a shop on my own. I wrote in and told them, and they excused me the duty, says June. Good. Well, that's the way it should be. I mean, if you're self-employed, you can't be expected to give up your income for things like that.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
That's it for the latest look back at Talking Heads. Our thanks to everyone who took part in the programme this week. If you'd like to get involved in the discussion yourself, you can call, text or email between midday and 2 p.m. on weekdays. Or you can get your thoughts to us via Facebook or Twitter using the hashtag MRTalkingHeads. You can listen back to each day's programme in full using the on-demand section of manxradio.com. And if there's anything you think we should be discussing on the programme, get it to us by emailing talk@manxradio.com. But that's it for now, so until next time, goodbye.
Don't sit in the slow lane. Join the fast lane right now with Shaw's all-new Superfast Plus broadband. Enjoy more bandwidth, amazing speeds and the best value on the island from just £23.95 per month. So don't be left behind. Get a piece of the high-speed action with Superfast Plus broadband from Shaw. For details, visit our stores in Douglas, Ramsey and Port Erin or click shaw.com.
Love being Shaw.
Terms and conditions apply.